The Abandoned One. The planet was cold. The sky was dark. Strange blue mist floated above the cracked ground. The wind howled through jagged rocks, carrying the smell of something rotten. It was a dead place. A small figure lay in the dirt, her breathing shallow. Her body was covered in bruises and deep cuts. Her silver eyes, once bright, were now dull. Her purple skin, smooth and flawless before, was burned in several places. She was alone, and she was dying. Her name was Lyra. She was not human. She was Zithar, a species known for their strength, their cruelty, and their unbreakable laws. But Lyra had broken a rule so sacred that her own people had left her here to die. She coughed weakly. Her throat was dry. She had no food, no water, no weapons. She had nothing. And soon, she would have nothing left. A ship in the distance, high above the planet, a ship moved through space, scanning for valuable wreckage. It was an old human ship, built for scavengers and traders. Its name was the Pathfinder. Inside, Captain Jonas Reed leaned back in his chair, his boots resting on the control panel. He was a man in his late 40s, with sharp eyes and a face lined with experience. His crew was small but skilled. Survivors, fighters, explorers. They weren't soldiers, but they had seen enough war to know when to run. The ship's AI suddenly beeped. "Captain, detecting weak life signs on the planet's surface," the AI reported. Jonas frowned and sat up. "Human? No. Unknown species. Life signs are fading." Beside him, Dr. Emily Carter, the ship's medic, looked at the screen. She had curly dark hair and sharp blue eyes. "They're dying, whoever they are," she said. "We should check it out." "Not our problem," said Grayson, the ship's engineer. He was a big man with a thick beard and a bad attitude. Could be a trap. Or worse, Zithar territory. Jonas didn't like the sound of that. The Zithar were a dangerous alien race. Humans had fought them before, and lost. Still, something about this felt different. "Bring us closer," Jonas ordered. "Let's get a look." The ship lowered through the planet's thin atmosphere. The scanners locked onto a small body, motionless on the ground. A child. No, not human, but young. Emily's voice was firm. "She's alive, Jonas. We can't just leave her." Grayson crossed his arms. "We can, and we should." A faint whisper. Lyra could feel the ship above her. She could hear the low hum of engines cutting through the sky. Her eyes fluttered open. She wanted to move. She wanted to cry out. But her body refused to obey. Her people had left her here. She was supposed to die. But now, someone else had come. Were they here to save her, or finish what the Zithar had started? Then she heard voices, strange, rough, but not cruel. Not Zithar. A shadow moved over her, blocking out the weak sunlight. She blinked up at the figures standing above her. One of them knelt down, a human woman with kind eyes and a soft voice. "She's just a kid," Emily whispered. "Jonas, we have to take her." Jonas sighed. He had seen many things in his life, many broken, lost souls left behind in the darkness. But this girl, she was not human, not their responsibility, not their fight. And yet, he could see it in her eyes. The fear, the pain, the silent plea. He had seen that look before. Jonas clenched his jaw. "Get her on the ship," he ordered. "Now." The hunter arrives. As the Pathfinder's crew lifted Lyra onto their ship, something watched from the shadows. A small metal drone, its red eye glowing, floated near the rocks, recording everything. The moment the humans carried Lyra away, the drone sent a signal. Far beyond the planet, a Zithar warship received the message. A deep voice rumbled through the command deck. "The traitor has been found." The Zithar commander turned to his crew. "Prepare the fleet. The humans have taken what belongs to us. They will suffer for this mistake." The warship powered up, its engines roaring to life. The hunt had begun. A risky rescue. The soft hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the metal floor. The Pathfinder had escaped the planet's surface, but something heavy hung in the air, something unspoken. Inside the medical bay, Dr. Emily Carter worked quickly, scanning the alien girl's fragile body. She had never treated a Zithar before. Their physiology was different, their biology a mystery. But one thing was clear. This girl had been left to die. Lyara's breathing was weak. Her skin, a deep shade of violet, was covered in strange burns, not just from the planet's harsh environment, but from something else. Something cruel. Emily placed a hand on the girl's forehead. Her skin was cold, almost lifeless. "Come on, kid. Hold on," she whispered. A decision that could kill them. Outside the med bay, Captain Jonas Reed stood at the control deck, staring at the holographic map of nearby space. His fingers drummed against the console. "This was a mistake," Grayson muttered beside him. His thick arms were crossed, his expression hard. "She's Zithar, Jonas. You know what that means." Jonas exhaled sharply. Yeah, he knew. The Zithar were ruthless. They had no mercy for weakness. They had no patience for those who refused to obey. And they had no love for humans. Bringing a Zithar child on board, that was a death sentence. Jonas turned toward the ship's AI interface. Any signs of pursuit? The AI's smooth voice responded. No enemy vessels detected within immediate range. Good, Jonas muttered. But it didn't mean they were safe. The Zithar never left loose ends. A soft sound made him pause. A whisper, a breath. Jonas turned to see Lyara standing in the doorway of the med bay, unsteady on her feet. Her silver eyes were wide, filled with something between fear and exhaustion. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lyara whispered something, her voice trembling. "You should not have saved me." Truth in the darkness. Emily rushed to Lyra's side, helping her sit back down. "You shouldn't be walking yet," she scolded gently. Lyra barely reacted. She stared at the humans around her, confusion and pain mixing on her face. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me?" Jonas studied her carefully. She wasn't what he expected. The Zithar were supposed to be warriors, ruthless and cold. But this girl, she was afraid. She was alone. Jonas sighed, leaning against the wall. "It's what we do." Lyra's fingers curled into fists. "That is foolish." "Maybe," Jonas admitted, "but it's better than leaving people to die." Silence filled the room. Then, finally, Lyra spoke. "They are coming for me." The Zithar's wrath. Deep in space, far from the human vessel, a Zithar warship floated silently in the void. Inside, Commander Vorik stood on the bridge, his eyes locked on the holographic display before him. The drone's last transmission flickered across the screen, an image of Lyra being carried into a human ship. Disgraceful. A warrior who refused to follow orders was not a warrior at all. She was a mistake. And the humans, foolish creatures, they had no idea what they had just done. Vorik turned to his crew. His voice was sharp, unforgiving. "Locate them." One of the officers nodded. "Scanning. There, Sector 14. They are moving toward the border." Vorik's lips curled into a thin smile. "Good. Let them run. Let them believe they are safe." His claws tapped against the metal console. "Prepare the fleet. We will crush them before they reach human space. Nowhere to hide." On the Pathfinder, the warning alarms blared. The AI's voice rang through the speakers. "Multiple enemy ships detected. Zithar fleet incoming." Jonas cursed. How the hell did they find us so fast? Grayson slammed his fists against the console. "I told you. We should have left her there." Lyra stood in the middle of the chaos, her expression unreadable. She knew this was coming. She had warned them. The Zithar did not forget. They did not forgive. She turned to Jonas, her voice soft but serious. "If you give me to them, they may let you live." Jonas did not hesitate. "Not happening." Emily tightened her grip on Lyra's arm. "We don't abandon people. Not now. Not ever." Lyra's silver eyes flickered with something unreadable. Hope. Disbelief. It didn't matter. The Pathfinder had only one choice now. Run. The chase begins. The ship lurched as it sped toward the border of human space, but the Zithar fleet was closing in. Jonas's hands gripped the controls. "Hang on." The ship twisted through an asteroid field, dodging plasma fire from the warships behind them. The crew held their breath as explosions rocked the space around them. Grayson shouted from the engine room, "We can't outrun them forever." Jonas's mind raced. They needed a plan. "Emily, get her to safety." "Grayson, prepare the warp drive." Lyra's voice suddenly cut through the noise. "They will not stop." Jonas glanced at her. "Yeah, I got that." She shook her head. "No, you do not understand. They would rather destroy this ship than let me escape." A realization settled over the crew. The Zithar weren't just chasing them. They were hunting them. Jonas gritted his teeth. "Then we'd better make them regret it." The Pathfinder roared forward, leaving a trail of burning stars behind. The chase had begun. Betrayal from the stars. The Pathfinder tore through space, its engines burning hot as it fled from the Zithar warships. Inside, red warning lights flashed, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The AI's voice crackled over the speakers. "Enemy vessels in pursuit. Distance. Decreasing." Jonas gripped the controls, his knuckles white. "Grayson, give me more speed." From the engine bay, Grayson's frustrated voice blasted through the comms. "I'm already pushing her past the limit. You want more, we're gonna blow ourselves up." Jonas cursed under his breath. The Zithar weren't just chasing them. They were closing the gap fast. Their warships were built for speed, for hunting prey. And now, the Pathfinder was their prey. "Emily, status on our guest," Jonas called. In the med-bay, Dr. Emily Carter wiped sweat from her forehead. Lyra sat on the examination table, her silver eyes blank as she stared at the floor. "Physically, she'll live," Emily answered. "Mentally, I don't know." Jonas swore. He didn't have time for this. If they didn't shake the Zithar soon, they were all dead. And then, the AI's voice cut through the noise. "Incoming transmission. Human origin." Jonas's head snapped up. "Put it through." A voice crackled over the comms. "This is Captain Darnell of the HFY Vanguard. You are ordered to halt your ship immediately and prepare for inspection." The Pathfinder's crew exchanged looks. A human ship. Now. Grayson's voice came over the speakers. "Oh, this just keeps getting better." Jonas clenched his jaw. A human patrol was the last thing they needed. But maybe it was also their only way out. An impossible choice. A minute later, the Pathfinder drifted to a slow stop, hovering in space. Outside, the HFY Vanguard, a large human battleship, loomed like a steel mountain. Jonas stood at the airlock, his pulse steady but his instincts screaming. Something wasn't right. A moment later, the airlock hissed open, and a group of human soldiers stepped inside, their weapons ready. Captain Darnell followed behind them, his expression unreadable. He was a tall man with sharp gray eyes and a uniform too clean for someone who claimed to be on patrol. Jonas crossed his arms. "Captain, you got bad timing." Darnell didn't blink. "Jonas Reed, you're carrying the Zithar fugitive. Surrender her now." The words hit like a hammer. Jonas's eyes flicked to his crew. Emily stiffened beside Lyra, who sat motionless, her hands curling into fists. Grayson muttered, "Knew it. They sold us out." Jonas exhaled slowly. "You don't understand. The Zithar left her to die. She's just a kid." Darnell's face remained cold. "Not our problem. Hand her over." Jonas glanced at the soldiers. They weren't lowering their weapons. They weren't negotiating. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was a trade. The realization hit hard. Someone in the human government had cut a deal with the Zithar. They wanted Lyra gone. And Jonas had two choices: give her up, or fight his own people. Lyra's breaking point. For the first time, Lyra spoke. Her voice was quiet, but sharp as a blade. I told you, you should not have saved me. Emily's heart twisted. She crouched next to the girl. Lyra, don't say that. We're not giving you up. Lyra's silver eyes burned with something dark. It is not your choice. I was already dead. Your kindness means nothing. Jonas watched her carefully. The words weren't spoken in anger. They were spoken in resignation. This was what the Zithar had done to her. They had made her believe that no one would ever fight for her. Jonas turned back to Darnell, his expression unreadable. If we refuse, Darnell exhaled, then the Zithar will come. You know they will. You can't outrun them forever, Jonas. They will tear this ship apart. Jonas knew he was right. They weren't strong enough to fight a fleet. But something in his gut told him that if he handed Lyra over, the Zithar wouldn't stop there. They wouldn't just kill her. They would make an example of her. And then, they'd come for the humans next. Jonas looked at his crew. Emily's face was pale but determined. Grayson gave a slow nod. They knew what he was thinking, and they weren't backing down. Jonas turned to Lyra. You still want to die? She hesitated. Because I'm telling you right now, we are risking everything to keep you alive. Lyra swallowed hard. But why? Jonas's voice was firm. Because that's what humans do. A long silence. Then, finally, a flicker of something in Lyra's eyes. Something fragile. Something called hope. And Jonas grabbed his gun. Betrayal in blood. The room exploded into chaos. Jonas moved first, slamming his elbow into Darnell's gut. The captain staggered back as Grayson grabbed one of the soldiers, twisting his rifle away. Emily pulled Lyra behind cover as gunfire erupted in the narrow hallway. Darnell's voice roared over the comms. They're resisting. Take them down. Jonas ducked behind a crate, blasting two soldiers before they could fire. Emily grabbed Lyra's arm. We have to go. Now. Lyra's heart pounded. Her whole body trembled. Humans were fighting for her, dying for her. Why? The question burned in her mind, louder than the gunfire. She didn't understand them. But in that moment, she wanted to. She grabbed Emily's hand, and they ran. Escape to nowhere. Grayson threw a smoke grenade, filling the hall with thick, blinding clouds. Jonas sprinted toward the bridge, slamming his fist on the controls. AI. Cut the locks. Emergency launch. Now. Warning. Launching will sever all docking connections. Do it. The Pathfinder lurched violently as its docking clamps snapped apart, breaking free from the Vanguard. Jonas barely got into his seat before the ship roared forward, engines blazing. Outside the viewport, the Zithar fleet was waiting. Jonas exhaled sharply. Well, hell. They had escaped the humans. But now, they had nowhere left to run. A desperate escape. The Pathfinder shot through space, its engines screaming under the stress. Plasma fire exploded behind them, bright blue streaks tearing through the void. The ship jolted violently as another near hit sent shockwaves through its hull. Inside the cockpit, Jonas Reed gritted his teeth, hands tight on the controls. Shields down to 30%, the AI warned. Grayson's voice came through the comms, filled with frustration. I told you this was a bad idea. Jonas ignored him. He knew. They had just escaped a betrayal from their own kind, only to fly straight into a Zithar ambush. Behind them, 3 Zithar warships closed in, their dark, sharp-edged hulls cutting through the stars like predators hunting their prey. The lead vessel, a towering flagship with glowing red symbols, belonged to Commander Vorik himself. And he wasn't here to negotiate. The enemy who never stops. Deep inside the Zithar flagship, Commander Vorik stood on the bridge, watching the Pathfinder struggle against his fleet. His claws tapped against the console as he observed the chase. The humans were fast, but they weren't fast enough. A Zithar officer turned toward him. "Commander, the human vessel is attempting to outrun us." Vorik barely reacted. "They cannot. Increase pursuit speed." The officer hesitated. "Sir, if we fire now, we may damage the girl." Vorik's eyes flashed. "Do you think I care?" His voice was calm, but filled with venom. "Fire." Running out of time. The Pathfinder shook violently as the Zithar ships unleashed another wave of plasma fire. In the mid-bay, Emily Carter tried to keep Liara steady as the ship rocked. Liara's silver eyes were wide, staring at the walls as if she wasn't really there. Emily grabbed her shoulders. "Liara, I need you to focus." Liara barely blinked. "Why?" Emily's breath caught in her throat. The girl wasn't just scared, she was giving up. Emily shook her. "Because if you don't, we all die." Liara flinched but didn't pull away. Emily softened her voice. "We're fighting for you. You have to fight too." A deep silence passed between them. Then, slowly, Liara's fingers curled into fists. She was still afraid. But for the first time, she didn't want to run. The impossible plan. Jonas swung the ship left, barely dodging a plasma bolt. He cursed under his breath. They were running out of time. "Grayson, tell me you have something." From the engine room, Grayson's voice crackled. "We can't outgun them. Only option is to lose them." Jonas's eyes flicked to the radar. Zithar ships everywhere. No escape. Then he saw it. A nearby asteroid field. Dense, unstable, and filled with deadly gravitational pockets. A death trap. Grayson saw it too. "Oh, hell no. Don't even think about it." Jonas's hands tightened on the controls. "I'm thinking about it." Grayson groaned. "This is suicide." Jonas smirked. "Only if we screw up. So, definitely suicide." Jonas pushed the thrusters to full power. "Buckle up." The Pathfinder dove into the asteroid field, with the Zithar fleet right behind them. Through the fire. Massive space rocks spun in the void, their jagged edges waiting to rip the ship apart. The Pathfinder twisted and turned, dodging debris by mere inches. Behind them, the Zithar ships hesitated. Their vessels were larger, stronger, but also less maneuverable. Vorik watched, eyes narrowing. "They think they can escape us in there." A cruel smile formed on his face. "Prove them wrong." The Zithar ships opened fire, not at the Pathfinder, but at the asteroids. Jonas's heart dropped as explosions erupted all around them. "They're trying to collapse the field." A massive rock tumbled toward them. Spinning fast, Jonas jerked the controls, barely scraping past it. Behind them, one of the Zithar ships miscalculated and slammed into a floating asteroid, exploding in a burst of fire. Jonas smirked. "Looks like they're screwing up too." Grayson's voice crackled. "Yeah, but we won't last much longer either." Emily's voice suddenly came through the comms. "Liara has an idea." Jonas frowned. "What?" Emily turned to the young Zithar girl. "Tell him." Liara hesitated. Then she took a deep breath. "We must go deeper." Jonas blinked. "Deeper, into the asteroid field. We'll be crushed." Liara shook her head. "Not if we go where their ships cannot follow." Jonas hesitated. Then he saw it. Deep within the asteroid belt, a swirling blue vortex, an ancient gravity well. It was a natural black hole, barely stable, hidden between the rocks. A suicidal path. Jonas exhaled. "You sure about this?" Liara looked straight into his eyes. "Trust me." Jonas nodded. "All right, Hid. Let's do it." The final gamble. The Pathfinder plunged into the vortex, twisting between collapsing asteroids. Behind them, the remaining Zithar warships hesitated. Commander Vorik's face darkened. Fools. They are signing their own death sentence. His officer hesitated. Sir, our scanners can't track them inside the vortex. Should we pursue? Vorik watched the swirling chaos. Then he made his decision. No, let them die in the storm. He turned away, voice cold. We'll find their remains later. The Zithar ships stopped pursuit. And just like that, the Pathfinder vanished into the unknown. Nowhere left to run. The Pathfinder twisted through the storm of collapsing asteroids, its engines screaming as it fought against the powerful gravity of the vortex. Jonas gripped the controls, sweat dripping down his face. The ship's warning alarms blared, the AI's voice cold and emotionless. Warning. Gravitational field increasing. Hull integrity at 65%. Grayson's voice crackled through the comms. This ship wasn't built for this, Jonas. We're gonna get torn apart. Jonas didn't respond. He couldn't. He was too busy flying, dodging, weaving, fighting for every second of survival. Behind them, the Zithar ships had stopped pursuit, watching from a safe distance. They believed the Pathfinder was already doomed. They weren't wrong. Emily clung to a support rail in the med bay, keeping Lara close. The young Zithar girl was breathing fast, her silver eyes locked on the swirling chaos outside. Emily's voice was urgent. You said we had to go deeper. What do we do now? Lyra's fists clenched. She didn't know. She had seen a way in. She hadn't thought about a way out. Jonas's voice came over the comms, strained but sharp. Kid, if you got any more ideas, now's the time. Liara hesitated. Then something clicked in her mind. A memory. A lesson she had ignored. A story of ancient Zithar warships that had once used such storms to hide from enemies. She looked at the ship's screen, studying the shifting gravity wells ahead. And then she saw it. A pathway through the chaos. A narrow tunnel where the pull of the vortex was weakest. A chance. Her voice was urgent. 30 degrees to port. Then drop altitude by 500 meters. Jonas didn't question her. He just acted. He pulled the ship hard left, dropping straight toward what looked like a solid wall of asteroids. Emily gasped. Grayson cursed. And then, the ship slipped through a hidden gap just as two massive asteroids smashed together behind them. Jonas exhaled sharply. Okay. That was terrifying. Lyra's voice remained steady. Again. 2 degrees starboard, then prepare for acceleration. Jonas followed her instructions without hesitation. One turn, then another. The ship ducked and wove through impossible spaces, finding a rhythm in the chaos. And then, they saw it. An opening beyond the storm. A path back into normal space. Jonas punched the thrusters. The Pathfinder shot forward, breaking free from the gravitational pull just as the vortex collapsed behind them. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Emily let out a weak, shaky laugh. We're alive. Grayson exhaled. Barely. Jonas slumped back in his chair, breathing hard. Kid, I don't know how you did that, but... Liara just stared out at the stars ahead. For the first time in her life, she had done something not for herself, but for others. And for the first time, someone had listened to her. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The price of survival. Hours later, the ship drifted in the quiet darkness of space, its hull scarred from the battle, its crew exhausted. Jonas sat at the control deck, staring at the radar screen. No signs of pursuit, no signals from human authorities. For now, they were ghosts. Emily approached, arms crossed. So, what now? Jonas sighed. Good question. Grayson sat nearby, rubbing his forehead. We can't go back to human space. The Vanguard branded us criminals. And if we go too far into uncharted space, we'll starve before we find a place to land. Emily frowned. There's gotta be somewhere. Jonas exhaled, rubbing his jaw. There is one place. Grayson groaned. I hate it already. Jonas ignored him. He turned toward Lyra, who had been silently listening. Ever heard of Orion's graveyard? Lyra blinked. Yes, it is a place of the Forsaken. Jonas nodded. Exactly. And right now, that's us. Orion's graveyard. Orion's graveyard was an abandoned war zone, deep in neutral space, a place where no government held power, a place where only the desperate survived. It was a graveyard of old warships, scavengers, and criminals, a place where fugitives could hide. The perfect place for them. Jonas punched in the coordinates. The ship lurched forward, heading into the unknown. Grayson shook his head. This is a terrible idea. Jonas smirked. Probably. Emily looked at Lyra, studying her carefully. The girl had proven herself, but she was still hiding something. Something about the way she looked at the stars. As if she knew something they didn't. And Emily wasn't the only one who noticed. Jonas leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharp. All right, kid. Spill it. Lyra stiffened. What? Jonas's voice was calm, but firm. You knew how to navigate that storm. You knew more about it than you should have. Lyra hesitated. Emily tilted her head. You weren't just abandoned, were you? Lyra's fingers curled against her sleeves. No. She looked up, silver eyes hardening. I stole something from them. Silence filled the room. Jonas's stomach dropped. What? Lyra took a deep breath. Something the Zithar will never stop hunting me for. Grayson groaned. Oh, come on. Emily leaned forward. What did you take? Lyra's voice was quiet, but her words were like a bomb. A map. Jonas's jaw clenched. A map to what? Lyra finally looked him in the eyes. To the Zithar's greatest secret. Defying an empire. The Pathfinder drifted through space, heading toward a place that few dared to go. Orion's graveyard. Inside, the crew sat in silence, their minds struggling to process Lyra's confession. She hadn't just been abandoned by her people. She had stolen something. Something the Zithar Empire would kill to get back. Jonas leaned against the control panel, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. All right, kid. Start talking. Lyra's silver eyes flickered with hesitation, but she had come too far to stop now. It is a map, she said finally. A map to a place the Zithar have kept secret for centuries. Emily narrowed her eyes. What kind of place? Lyra swallowed hard. A vault. A hidden stronghold. Jonas's jaw clenched. What's inside? Lyra hesitated. Then, finally, she whispered. Something that could destroy the Zithar. A secret too dangerous to hold. The words hung in the air like a loaded gun. Grayson broke the silence first, rubbing his forehead. Fantastic. We're not just running from them. We're carrying the one thing they'd tear the galaxy apart to find. Emily exhaled. Lyra, how did you even get this? Lyra's gaze dropped to the floor. My father was a general, a high-ranking officer in the Zithar fleet. Jonas frowned. Was. Lyra's hands curled into fists. He found the map. He told me, the Zithar Empire is not as strong as it seems. Their power is built on something hidden, something they fear. Jonas exchanged a glance with Emily. Fear. Lyra nodded. Whatever it is in that vault, the Zithar don't want anyone to find it. Grayson let out a slow breath. So your father wanted to expose it. Lyra's expression darkened. He tried, and they killed him for it. Silence fell over the room. Emily's heart ached for the girl. The Zithar were known for their ruthlessness, but to kill one of their own leaders to protect a secret, that meant whatever was in that vault was worth more than an entire fleet. Jonas finally spoke. And you stole the map from them. Lyra nodded. Before they could destroy it. But I didn't have time to learn what the vault holds. I only know where it is. Jonas rubbed his face. This just kept getting worse. And now the entire Zithar fleet is hunting you for it." Lyara's voice was quiet. "Yes." Grayson groaned. "I really, really hate this job." Orion's graveyard. As the Pathfinder approached Orion's graveyard, the crew got their first look at the legendary scrapyard of dead ships. The wreckage of old warships floated in massive clusters, remnants of battles long forgotten. Some ships were barely holding together, their hulls torn apart by time and scavengers. It was a lawless place, a haven for fugitives, mercenaries, and those who had nowhere else to go. Jonas stared at the chaos ahead, his fingers tapping against the console. "We'll need to be careful. This place isn't just a hiding spot. It's a feeding ground for pirates." Emily sighed. "So what's the plan?" Jonas smirked. "Simple. We find someone who hates the Zithar as much as we do. A dangerous alliance. The Pathfinder weaved through the wreckage, avoiding the scavenger ships picking apart old war vessels. Jonas finally brought the ship down onto a floating platform, a black market trading hub known as the Hollow. The moment they stepped out of the ship, they were being watched. Ragged figures moved through the shadows, eyes following their every step. Weapons were everywhere, hidden beneath coats, strapped to backs, glinting in the dim light. Grayson muttered under his breath, "I feel like we just walked into a bar full of people who want to kill us." Jonas smirked. "That's because we did." At the center of the market, Jonas led them toward a rusted-out bar. Inside, smoke curled in the air. Conversations paused as they entered. And at the back of the room, sitting in a booth, was the man Jonas was looking for. A grizzled former warlord, his cybernetic arm resting on the table, a half-empty glass in front of him. His name was Rax Novar, and he was one of the few people in the galaxy who had survived a war against the Zithar and lived to tell the tale. Jonas sat across from him, keeping his voice low. "I hear you don't like the Zithar." Rax's mechanical fingers tapped against his glass. "They burned my world." His voice was rough, filled with old anger. "I'd kill every last one of them if I could." Jonas smirked. "Good, because we might have something you'd be interested in." Rax raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Jonas leaned forward. "How would you like to help us take down the entire Zithar Empire?" The Zithar arrive. Before Rax could respond, a loud alarm echoed through the hollow. The entire market froze. Jonas's blood ran cold as the sound of heavy boots filled the air. A dozen Zithar enforcers entered the bar, their armor dark and their eyes scanning the crowd. One of them spoke, his voice a growl. "We are looking for a fugitive." Jonas didn't move. Neither did Lyra. The Zithar warrior held up a holoscreen, and on it was Lyra's face. "She is here, and if you do not give her up, we will burn this station to the ground." The room tensed. Scavengers and mercenaries exchanged nervous glances. The Zithar weren't bluffing. Jonas's hand moved slowly toward his weapon. Rax Novar exhaled, swirling the last of his drink. Then, without warning, he slammed his mechanical fist into the nearest Zithar's face. Chaos erupted. Blaster fire tore through the air. Jonas grabbed Lyra's arm. "Run." They bolted for the exit, dodging gunfire as the hollow exploded into battle. Rax Novar charged into the fight, his cybernetic arm crushing the Zithar's throat. Jonas pulled Lyra behind cover, his mind racing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and they still had nowhere to run. But as Lyra looked up at him, her breath ragged, Jonas saw something new in her eyes. Not just fear, determination. For the first time, she wasn't just running. She was ready to fight. And Jonas knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was war. The last stand. Blaster fire ripped through the air, painting the dimly lit corridors of the hollow with flashes of blue and red. Smoke curled from burning stalls, and the screams of traders, mercenaries, and scavengers echoed across the chaotic battlefield. The Zithar enforcers advanced like a wave, their dark armor gleaming under the flickering lights. Their energy rifles unleashed deadly streaks of plasma, cutting through anyone who stood in their way. Jonas Reed gritted his teeth, pulling Liara behind a metal crate as another explosion rocked the ground. "We can't stay here," Emily shouted, ducking behind cover beside them. "We're sitting targets." Grayson fired wildly down the corridor, cursing under his breath. "I told you Orion's graveyard was a bad idea." Jonas ignored him, scanning the battlefield. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but something far worse loomed over them. They had nowhere left to run. An unexpected ally. Rax Novar stood his ground in the middle of the chaos, his cybernetic arm smashing through a Zithar warrior's skull like it was nothing more than glass. His other hand lifted a massive scattergun, blasting 2 more enforcers into the wall. His gravelly voice boomed through the room. "Ever Yoan who hate is, Aezytaar. Stand with me." For a moment, there was hesitation. The traitors, mercenaries, and scavengers had long feared the Zithar, knowing they couldn't stand against an empire. But now they saw something different. Jonas, Emily, and Grayson weren't running. Rax Novar wasn't bowing, and at the center of it all, Liara stood tall, her silver eyes burning with newfound resolve. The fear that had once controlled her was gone. She had run long enough. Now she was ready to fight. One by one, the scavengers grabbed weapons, turning toward the Zithar. "For Orion!" Someone roared. And just like that, Orion's graveyard exploded into war. The turning point. Jonas fired shot after shot, covering Emily as she pulled an injured scavenger out of the line of fire. Grayson worked quickly, rewiring a set of blast doors to seal off one of the corridors. Rax charged headfirst into the enemy, his cybernetic fist crushing the Zithar soldier's chest plate. Liara stood in the center of the battlefield, her fists clenched. Her people had hunted her, abandoned her, and left her for dead. And now she was leading the charge against them. One of the Zithar warriors locked eyes with her, hesitating for just a second. That second was a mistake. Liara grabbed a fallen energy rifle and fired. The plasma bolt pierced through his armor, sending him crashing to the ground. Her breath was heavy, her heart pounding. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel powerless. She felt alive. The Zithar's last move. The battle raged on, bodies falling on both sides. Jonas checked his ammo. "We can't hold them forever." Liara turned to him, her eyes sharp. "Then we don't." Jonas frowned. "What are you talking about?" Liara grabbed his arm. "We need to get to the Pathfinder. Now." Jonas looked at the battlefield. They had the upper hand for now, but the Zithar wouldn't stop sending reinforcements. They had to leave. But before they could move, the ground shook violently. Grayson looked up, his face turning pale. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." A Zithar dreadnought had appeared above the station, its massive cannons aiming directly at the hollow. Jonas's blood ran cold. "They're going to wipe us all out." Rax Novar spat blood onto the ground. "They'd rather burn this place than let you escape." Emily's voice was urgent. "Jonas, we need a way out." Now, Jonas's mind raced. Then he looked at Liara. "That vault. You said it holds something the Zithar fear." Liara nodded. Jonas took a deep breath. "Then let's stop running and go find it." Liara's eyes widened. "You're serious?" Jonas smirked. "Dead serious." Liara hesitated for only a moment. Then she squared her shoulders. "Then let's go." The Great Escape. The crew pushed forward, fighting their way through the crumbling marketplace. The Pathfinder was docked on the far side of the station, but getting to it was suicide. Or at least, it should have been. Because the scavengers and mercenaries of Orion's graveyard weren't just running anymore. They were fighting back. With Rax leading the charge, the outlaws pushed against the Zithar forces, creating just enough of a distraction for Jonas and his crew to break free. They raced toward the ship, dodging fire and debris as the dreadnought's cannons powered up. Jonas slammed his fist on the comms. "Aye. Start the engines. We're leaving." The Pathfinder roared to life, its thrusters shaking the entire docking bay. Jonas, Emily, Grayson, and Lyra jumped aboard just as the doors sealed shut. "Go!" Jonas shouted. The ship's thrusters flared, and within seconds, the Pathfinder was airborne, blasting out of the hollow just as the dreadnought fired. The station erupted in flames. Jonas didn't look back. They had barely made it out alive. But they weren't safe yet. A new mission. As the ship entered hyperspace, silence filled the cockpit. No alarms, no gunfire, just silence. Liara finally spoke. "We're really doing this." Jonas nodded. "We're going after that vault." Emily exhaled. "And if we find something the Zithar don't want us to see?" Jonas smirked. "Then we show it to the whole damn galaxy." Grayson groaned. "Why do I keep agreeing to this insanity?" Raxnover leaned back in his seat, arms crossed. "You'll need an army if you're planning to take down the Zithar." Jonas turned to him. "Think you can help with that?" Rax's cybernetic hand flexed. "Oh, I can do more than that." He grinned. "I can start a revolution." The war begins. Far away, on a Zithar homeworld, Commander Vorik stood before a massive throne. A towering figure sat in the shadows. The Zithar supreme leader. Vorik knelt before him. "They escaped, but they will not run forever." The supreme leader's voice was cold. "No, they will come to us." His sharp claws tapped against the throne's armrest. "Let them come. And when they do, we will destroy them all."